Good morning, boys and girls. I hope you've had a good week. Today, we're going to talk about our Sunday school lesson, and it's in the book of Luke, which is in the New Testament, which, remember, is towards the back of the book, Old Testament in the front, New Testament in the back. Remember, we talked about last Sunday how Jesus had died and they had buried him in the tomb, and then as Mary and Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, they found that Jesus was no longer there. He had risen. He was no longer dead, but he is alive. So today we're going to look in Luke 12 and see what else has happened since Jesus rose from the tomb. So if you go to Luke chapter 24 and starting in verse 13. Okay. There was two of the disciples or the followers of Jesus that was walking along the road to Emmaus. They were kind of arguing and carrying on with each other and talking about everything that had happened this past week. And then another man joined them. This man was Jesus, but they didn't know it. Jesus asked the two guys, "Hey, what y'all arguing about? What you talking about?" The men told Jesus everything that had happened this past few days. They said Jesus did many miracles, and we thought he was the person that the prophets said would come. But Jesus died on a cross, and now 3 days later, some women went to the tomb where he was buried, and it was empty. And an angel told them that Jesus was alive. They kept walking on, the two men and Jesus reminded them what the Bible had said about Jesus. Well, when they all entered Emmaus, the men asked the other guy, who is Jesus, but they didn't know it was Jesus, to stay with them. And he did. They sat down to eat, and Jesus took some bread, and he prayed over it, and he broke it in half and shared it with the men. All of a sudden, the men knew that it was Jesus that was sitting there at the table with them. The men returned to Jerusalem later on that night to find Jesus' disciples so that they could tell them they had seen Jesus and he was surely alive. Okay, now we're going to turn over to John, the next book of the Bible after Luke. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So now we're going to turn over to John chapter 20 and starting in verse 19 through verse 31, we're going to look at what else happened, okay? So the men had come back into Jerusalem and they had found Jesus' disciples, and they told the disciples about walking down the road and eating with Jesus, and that Jesus was surely alive. Well, all of the disciples were upstairs in the house, in the room, because they were kind of afraid of what was going on outside. All of a sudden, Jesus was in the room with them. The disciples were really happy, but Thomas, one of the disciples, he kind of thought, how do we really know that you're Jesus? So if we look in verse 27, it said, "Then Jesus said to Thomas, 'Put your fingers here on my hands and reach out your hand and put it here at my side. And you see where they hung me on the cross? and stop your doubting, Thomas." So Thomas looked at him and he said, "You are my Lord and my God. You are Jesus." And all of the disciples were really happy that they got to see Jesus, and they knew that Jesus is alive. And we can know that Jesus is alive too. I hope you received your packet, and I hope you enjoyed doing your worksheets and your activity. I hope you were able to go on the Facebook page too and participate in the scavenger hunts. I also want to wish a happy birthday to Judah and to Sarah. They had birthdays this past week. Okay. I hope to see you at the drive-in service. If you're there and you see me, wave at me, and I'll wave back at you until we can be together again. And then I'll see you again on Wednesday, and keep checking the Facebook page. You never know what will pop up there for you to do. And keep checking your mail. I'll be sending out some other things for you too. I love you all. See you Wednesday.